Team, come back.
Do you think AI is going to replace people?
Nah, not now. To other third parties, how do you assure that those third parties, are doing the right thing with that data?
Connections and proximity. What does that mean to me as a business? Are you using AI at all in the product set? Right, so this is the second podcast in the series. Stephane, great to be here again, sitting down with you, talking all things cyber, attack surface and supply chain. Recently I saw the press release from ThingsRecon, and there was some really interesting statistics there about things that you've discovered. Let's dive into that. I mean, I saw from the statistics that there was 777,000 devices that you'd looked at. But of those, 800,000 of them had high or critical severity, problems and vulnerabilities. What does that tell us?
Yeah, well, when we're looking at all the type of things and we look at just, let's say, the things called web apps, what I've seen is that on average, we see one issue per application. So we have more issues than applications that we looked at. And then from all those issues, some of them are, low risk, medium and high risk. But each of those applications having an issue, that doesn't mean that this is the only issue, because everything that is connected to it, it's something that you need to also look at, not just at the application, because you can have an issue on other things, like for example, a certificate that is connected to an application. So really, there's more than just one issue per application.
Yeah, and from the stats I saw that 1 in 3 certificates were actually misconfigured. So more than 33% of all certificates that are out there on the internet are poorly configured or misconfigured.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. And this is a mix between production, dev environment, open on the internet. So really, 30%. Yeah. It also basically was a surprise for me, to be honest, when I was looking at the stats. Again, not all misconfiguration for certificates are urgent to fix, but yeah, it's quite a big number.
Yeah, and then the other stat that really surprised me was 2/3 of domains showed multiple weaknesses, and I did the stats on that. That's 165% issues of density had an issue. I mean that is disgusting. Surely we've learned now that misconfigurations, poor security capabilities around encryption and domain setup, and still organizations don't seem to be solving that. Why do you think that is?
Oh, well, let's say like the way it is. Internet is a big mess anyway. So, but in terms of why you're not fixing it, there's a couple of answers to that. I mean, obviously too many things, and which one is the right one to fix is the main question, I would say. So we've seen a lot of people talking about how to prioritize all this. And I think one of the main things that we need to look at is context. Because not all of them needs to be fixed straight away. Certain things can be fixed later because they're not like a super urgent thing now that is going to happen. Yeah, but certain other bits that we're seeing on applications that potentially have, let's say, the crown jewels or are the perfect target. Those are the ones that they need to look at first. And I think so that context is very important.
So how does ThingsRecon help customers understand that context? Because that I know in my role as a CSO or chief risk officer or a CIO, I've really struggled to get my head around where do I invest my money, my team, my resources, and in what priority order. So how do ThingsRecon help me do that?
Yeah, so typically what I've seen with companies is that they know where the crown jewels are, but what they don't know is how they are connected to other things that are exposed. And I think that's the part where we can help, is to understand that context of proximity of other assets to the one that basically was brought forward because of the nature or because it's been recorded as being an important asset for the organization. But all the rest that is basically hidden, things that we cannot see straight away, but they are hidden behind. That's the thing that basically create the context, because it's not just about, you have the crown jewels in here, but it's what is connected to crown jewels, yeah? What else? Because it might be things that you were not even aware of. And I think that's the one that you need to really have visibility on.
Okay, so is that because of technology, like AI, putting technology in the hands of people who maybe aren't security aware or technology aware, and whilst it's really good to accelerate, the use and the use case, it doesn't really allow the customer to understand what they've got. So I think I call this tool sprawl, or application sprawl, where lots of applications are being built by, non-technical people, non-security people. It's very easy for them to go out and buy that on a credit card.
Yep.
Or more importantly, they've probably been to IT and they've been told it's a long time, a lot of cost, and a lot of associated hoops they've got to run through. So is that, do you think, exacerbating the problem?
Yeah, I mean, they're also testing things, and sometimes forgetting about those. Yeah, so they will install something, let's say a plugin or something on an application, and then testing it for a couple of days potentially, and forget to remove it. Yeah. So what I've seen is, when I was looking at the data that we basically discovered, is that we see a lot of little modules, little components that are spreading themselves between all those apps, and some organizations are very heavy user, or let's say heavy users of those type of things, but they need to understand that the more things you're adding to an application, the more you're gonna miss. Yeah, and mostly if you work with multiple teams, and I've seen organizations working with multiple teams on one application, for example, or one type of application, and adding things into it. But by adding things, you need to have control. You need to understand what you're adding. Yeah, and you need to understand where they're going, because most of those things, they will connect somewhere else. Yeah, for example, you take anything to do with tracking. All the data, that is basically captured while you are looking at the application as a normal user, goes somewhere else.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you see that? I mean, from your perspective, that the applications that you are building for your organization are sending data, potentially, PII data, to other third parties. How do you assure that those third parties, are doing the right thing with that data?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, as part of what I do in my role, it's about enabling the business to do business smarter. So there's a real big push on integration, on seamless integration between one app and another. So I'm seeing a lot more APIs now being used. I'm seeing a lot more microservices and layering of the data and the technology and the separation. But it's really hard, because sometimes you don't necessarily understand where that API is going to. You don't know how many APIs are out there. It seems to be a very innocuous plugin, but as you said, it actually has huge implications from a security standpoint. What is the data flowing? Is it secured in the right way? What does that mean in terms of geo fencing of the data? Is that data exposed in any way? What does that mean from a privacy standpoint? So it is a challenge, in all of the roles that I've got. But I think the biggest challenge for me is knowing where that data is coming from, knowing where that data is going to, and the impact and likelihood of that data being compromised.
And that information you're getting, you're talking obviously to different teams and different micro-organizations within your organization. So like potentially legal, procurement. So how do you basically now communicate now with those, those mini organizations to be able to explain the risk?
It's tough. I mean, it is tough. I mean, you're absolutely right. You've hit it on the head. I have organizations that I've worked with where I have platforms team, and I have an infrastructure team, and I have an IT team, and I might have a privacy team and a legal team and HR and marketing, and they're all trying to do the same thing for the business, which is grow the organization, get the customer to be sticky in terms of the products and the capabilities that they deliver. But the big challenge is how do we communicate on the single language? How do we understand what that risk is? So working with organizations that allow me to assess my holistic view of where my data is, what's flowing across that data, how it's secured is very important. But a bigger challenge I actually have is when those integrations come from my third parties. I might have an offshore development team, or I might have a plug-in to a customer, and it's understanding where those links are and those, as I think you described it as connections and proximity. What does that mean to me as a business? That's where I really, spend quite a lot of our time having those conversations and those discussions.
Yeah. So it looks like the more we're heading, into complex digital ecosystems, the more people within your organization you need to talk to.
Absolutely. I mean, my role as a CISO has changed over the years. It used to be very technically based, but now I have to understand regulations. I have to talk the language of marketing and communication. I have to have a legal understanding to understand what are the implications of sharing that data in certain geographies. I've got to have that technical understanding to be able to talk between the technical teams. Obviously, I've got to talk about security and governance and compliance and audit and risk. But it all boils down to one thing. It's really understanding the assets that I have, what data is flowing across those assets, how I've secured those assets, and probably fundamentally having the similar language so that no matter who we're talking to, we understand what we're talking about. It's not good going to talk to the board, for example, and talking about widgets and speeds and feeds and protocols. I really need to talk to them in a language of risk and a language of impact and a language of, what does that mean to us in terms of the data and the exposure or not of that data.
So that change is also felt on our side because we need to provide the data and based on those conversations you're going to have. So while before it could be very technical in terms of the data that we are providing, we also need to change from our side in terms of providing you the right ammunition so you can go and have those discussions. So from a vendor's perspective, we need also to embrace that because everything is changing around, and we also need to understand who we're talking to, and that person who we're talking to is also talking to other people. Yeah, so I think from our side that's also super important, and we need to map that. So when we provide the data, it's something that you can act on. Yeah, and is basically super important to have that answer to that question. So what? And because now the so what question is many different layers, to be honest.
It is, and unfortunately, the regulatory landscape is continually improving and changing. The threat landscape is massive now. I mean, certainly when I think about political instability in Europe, the geopolitical challenge actually means there's a lot more that we need to think about as a business. It's no longer just keeping my own organization safe and secure. It's where are my third parties coming from? What code are they using? Are those coming from embargoed or sanctioned countries? Is that data flowing across geographies that we wouldn't allow it to? What are the threat actors trying to do? Because I'm seeing a shift from just attacking large corporations to actually looking at my supply chain now and trying to infiltrate those because they know that they're so important into the business ecosystem of what we do.
Yeah, so the size doesn't really matter there. So if they are connected to you, and they're gonna look at it, and so it's very important to understand, obviously, that whole extended ecosystem that you have.
I'm interested, Steph, that you work with a lot of companies and you do a lot of scanning of data. Is there anything you've found or seen that really surprised you? We've talked about the statistics themselves, but with some of those organizations, you're working with financial institutions, you're working with consultancies, you're working with petrochemical organizations, insurance companies. Where do you think you're seeing most of that risk, and is there anything there that surprises you?
Surprise, not really. I mean, I would say, there's a trend across all the industries, and I think maybe more awareness in terms of explaining better what risk you can have when you have that massive amount of things on your digital surface. I think that's the part that we need to be better at translating, if you want, or making them understand. And what I've seen is, while I was doing those researches, is that it's just paths that have been created from one thing to another. And currently is basically you look at one type of asset and you're trying to fix that. But at the same time, you need to look at what is it connected, because maybe you have to fix something else, because even if you fix that one thing that is connected to that asset, that might not be the best defense. So really, like what I've seen is, because the amount of new technology, obviously AI and chatbots and things like this, what I'm seeing is that understanding of what you're plugging into the application, it's super important, because we see it. We see it now. We see it with the expansion of that whole digital surface, that a lot of organization potentially, when I'm talking to them, well, it's not potentially, to be honest, is all the time. When we show them something, there's always that element of surprise.
So you've not had a conversation with a customer where they knew everything that you told them?
Nah, that's impossible. I mean, there is, it's even for us now, when we're doing what we're doing in terms of discovery, we need to adapt, because there's new things coming in, and there's new ways of basically assets communicating between themselves. Like two assets together. Something like, think like two people talking together. Yeah. So we need to also take that into account. And when we're doing those discoveries, we are observing, we're looking at things that are different, that are changing, that we haven't seen before. And what we want to do, and because we are curious, we want to understand, how does it work? What is that doing here? Yeah. And so, yes, I mean, that's across the board. I mean, it's not just, one industry, it's all the industries. And that's because we are, I think, pushing too fast everything into that space, and we don't have enough time to be able to understand what could be the impact.
Okay, so do you agree with me then that there needs to be a seismic change then in security on thinking? I think traditionally we said we can lock everything down and we can control everything. Do you agree with me that actually it's not about locking things down now? It's about enabling the organization, the business, by looking at a risk-based approach, and then looking and understanding those connections of the assets and why. Because, I'll talk to lots of CISOs in the past, and they say CVEs. I'll focus on the CVEs in the order. But I actually don't think a CVE is the main answer to the problem, because just because you've addressed a vulnerability, it doesn't necessarily mean you're addressing a vulnerability that, one, is exploitable, two, is having a significant impact to your business, or three, it might actually cost you more to secure it than it would be to put a compensating control in. So I think my question is, do we need a seismic change on thinking on how to address the attack surface than the traditional lock it down, bar people?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, for sure. Because before we were locking down everything because everything was inside, and now we're pushing everything outside. So our way of doing things needs to be completely different. So enabling people, documenting, what you're doing, that's super important. So and the more you enable, the more they're gonna work with you, because the more you're trying to close them, the more things they're gonna do without you knowing.
So part of my challenge as a CISO is I'm being asked to do more for less. Yeah, or the same for less.
The same for less.
I think it probably is more. And part of the challenge you have is attracting the right talent, getting the right people into the team, or retaining them. So we're often faced with this challenge of the tsunami of data coming at us, with the ability to be able to go and fix things. How do ThingsRecon help me with that? How do you help me prioritize and really know what I have to go and fix?
Yeah, I mean, in here is, again, I'm going to use again the same word, context. Context. That's going to drive basically that remediation program or remediation activities. It's to try to help those teams with the amount, like you said, there's a lot of things out there, and reports are long and longer and getting longer because you're adding more stuff and stuff. So it's about understanding, okay, what is the context? How are we using things? What is the risk? What is the impact we're going to have in here? And then looking at, okay, what is going to be the impact in terms of what could be exploited today, what is not, like vulnerability intelligence. That's great for me. I mean, for me, that's something that really helps to understand better those CVs that you just mentioned. A tsunami of CVs. I mean, CVs is going to be always, we're going to have always CVs, yeah. And but understanding, okay, where do I need to go and prioritize? Because if you know, for example, that there is a CV or a vulnerability on an application, but it's not going to be exploited, that's not going to be your focus now. But if you have something that maybe have moved from not being exploited and now actively being exploited, and it's attached to your crown jewels in terms of context, yeah, that's going to be a target. So what we need to do is trying to reduce the noise and help the remediation teams which are swamped also. Same thing, if you have problems and as a CISO, you're seeing all that, the teams that are under have the same problems or even more. So we need to help them to be able to look at what they need to look at first and help them to how to fix it. And understanding that connectivity, and that creates basically the context for them also to know how to fix it. Because there's the context of what you have in terms of risk, but also in terms of remediation, because you're not going to fix everything the same way. Yeah.
So you're telling me that ThingsRecon provide me with that remediation plan, but then enriching that with the data that you bring in from other platforms and other capabilities.
Yeah, because we see those connections. Yeah, so we see those other things that could affect that. So when you provide a solution, it's not a generic solution. You cannot be static. Yeah, we need to understand more about what is on the sides to provide the right level of information so the teams can act in terms of remediation. So context could be on both sides.
Okay. So I think it would be remiss of me not to have a podcast and mention the word AI. What are ThingsRecon doing?
What is AI?
Yeah, I know. What are ThingsRecon doing in that space? I mean, are you using AI at all in the product set, in the capabilities, and what are you using it for?
Yeah, we're using it to be able to do stuff faster, of course, because you cannot just put humans behind. Now there's so many things that we need to look at. So we need to train models, trying to understand. Basically, we need to have a model for each type of things that we're looking at. So to be honest, we have a team. We have a team, like an agentic platform that can look at this. And over time, they learn, they talk to a manager, and then bring back what is important, and what you were saying last time, of interest, yeah. So we're training those models to be like that, to be clever, like as humans, but what you need to look at is to be able to contain them. So because bringing AI, it's great, but we need humans behind to look at this. Yeah.
So it's a mixture of people. So that was my next question.
Yeah, it needs.
Do you think AI is going to replace people?
Nah, not now. Not now. I mean, from what I've seen from on our side, it's something that needs. How does that? We need to help the AI to be better.
Okay.
And a lot of tools out there. You need basically to almost talk to them like if you were talking to a child.
Okay, so you're using AI then to help with the discovery, the massive amount of data that you're bringing into the platform. You're using it to help visualize the data for the customer. Are you using it anywhere else? Because I think I saw somewhere at ThingsRecon you're actually using it for training purposes as well. Training engineers. Is that true, or am I mis?
Well, let's put it this way: that currently is the engineers training the AI. So totally around, but I'm pretty sure later. Yes, we're going to have a little of a shift, but and it's used across. We use it in different means inside the organization. But I'm looking at it also from a security perspective, because we obviously need to secure what we're doing.
Yep.
So that's why it's important to understand, how you connect it, to those AI, assets or things, let's call them. And what we're doing is basically we're locking everything. So we're not allowing everything to go out because it's important for us to be able to have control.
So you're doing it the right way around. So what you're doing then is you're actually building your policy, you're building your strategy around how you're going to use AI in the right way, rather than throwing the technology at the platform and say, hey.
Yeah, it's like having another team that you need to basically control. Okay. So you need to create a policy almost for that, and how you're going to use it, what you cannot do, what can you do, where it can be connected, where it cannot be connected. So it's really like having a set of policy that definitely defined just for that piece.
So you're seeing it as an extension to the existing team rather than replacement for the team that you've got.
Yeah, it's an extension. It definitely helps, but it's not going to replace anyone.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm in the same mindset from a security standpoint, to be fair. I absolutely think there's positives and negatives of AI. The positives for me is I can use it to enrich data at the Security Operations Center much faster. I can use it to visualize things. I've automated some of the tasks that need to be automated, the routine tasks. But at the same time, I'm absolutely in the mindset that there's some negativity. I'm seeing AI being used for mass scale, phishing and vishing attacks, for example, which become much more tailored based on preferences of the individuals. But I'm with you. I think it's important to go about using AI in the right way, and it's good to see that you're embracing it.
It's being cautious, yes, because it's like, imagine you have an AI platform that is in the cloud. Will you throw your crown jewels there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I mean, so yeah, for testing is great, and maybe on dummy data or things like this, I will definitely use. But like for crown jewels, I will definitely have some, mechanism that I need to protect. So yeah, embrace it, but make sure that you have the right controls.
Okay, and let's finish off with that final question. What does ThingsRecon do compared to the competitors in the market? What makes you different?
I think we've seen it, and it's not us. Basically, that's what we're seeing from the organization we're talking to. Is the depth.
Okay.
So for us, it's not about the surface anymore, because scratching the surface, like we say, is not going to be enough. Or like we say, the tiptoe or whatever is of the iceberg, yeah, whatever you say on that side. So we need to look under, and I think that's where there is a big difference. Is we are trying to figure out everything about it, because there will be, in the depth, you will find things that could expose a whole, ecosystem somewhere.
So you're being very, very focused. You're doing what you do really well as a business, and what we're looking at is to look at the asset, look at the connections, look at the proximity, look at the data that's flowing off, look at the configurations of them, and then putting that into context of the business, as opposed to just doing a very high posture assessment.
Yeah, basically, we want to understand how it works. Yeah, and that's mindsets is what we have within the product, is trying to understand how things are working, so we can then better explain to customers or users of what do you have. Again, repeating the word context, and that will help to drive much better security, hopefully, for the organizations.
Steph, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for chatting today. Looking forward to the next podcast.
Yeah, let's do it again. Great.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.